What's up guys, I'm Brad Browning and you are tuned into the #1 breakup advice channel on YouTube. Now in this video, you'll be learning how, when, and why to meet up with your ex in order to get them back. Now let's begin by talking about whether or not meeting up with your ex is actually a good idea and whether or not it can actually help you get back together. Now in short, the answer to that is yes. As I'm sure you're already aware from watching some of my previous videos, you will likely need to meet up with your ex in person at least once or twice before you'll be able to win them back. And in fact, this is a key component of my X Factor program because rebuilding your ex's attraction to you is critical in order to make them want to get back together. Now, this kind of in-person meeting with your ex falls under the third and final step in my 3R system: recovery, rekindling, and reattraction. Now, it's extremely important that you go through the first two phases before you whip out your phone and start asking your ex to meet up. These first two steps are necessary to set the stage for your in-person meeting and will make sure that your ex says yes when you bring up the idea of hanging out. At the very least, you need to reset your ex's perception of you by helping him or her to forget about the bad parts of your relationship and focus instead on the happy, nostalgic ones. You also need to make sure your ex is in what I call an emotional neutral state. Now, there's a lot more in-depth information about these initial steps in the full video on my website, breakupbrad.com, but you really need to make sure that you've set the stage right by using the tactics that I described in that video before you try to set up a date with your ex. So head to breakupbrad.com and watch the free video tutorial to learn more. Now, I'm going to assume at this point that you've already taken these initial steps. You've already employed the no contact strategy for the full 30 days, and you've begun reestablishing positive rapport with your ex. And when you get to this point, it's time to meet up with your ex in person. And when it comes to actually arranging this in-person hangout with your ex, I've got a few important tips to share. Tip number 1 is to have a real bona fide reason for meeting with your ex. It's almost never a good idea to simply call or text your ex out of the blue and ask them out for coffee. That kind of approach is much more likely to cause suspicion in the back of your ex's mind, and it might reveal your true motivations for actually wanting to meet up. So to avoid this problem, you really need to think up a legitimate sounding reason to meet with your ex. And honestly, it doesn't really matter what the reason is, as long as it sounds reasonable and it's legitimate. So for example, let's say that you're currently in the process of starting your own business. If your ex happened to be an accountant, then you could ask him or her to spare half an hour so that you can get their advice on basic bookkeeping for your new company. Or maybe your ex was great at interior design and you're planning on renovating your basement suite. Well, you could send them a text message just asking if they'd be willing to meet briefly to give you some tips on choosing paint colors and furniture for the new suite. Now, these are just quick examples off the top of my head, but really the possibilities here are endless. What really matters is that you have a legitimate sounding reason for asking your ex to meet up, and you're not just, randomly suggesting it out of the blue for no good reason. Please trust me, if you have a reasonable sounding excuse for the meetup, you're much more likely to get your ex on board with the idea in the first place. And tip number 2, don't try to do too much too quickly. The last thing you want to do is set off alarm bells in your ex's head when you propose an in-person meetup. And like I mentioned earlier, you really want to avoid revealing your true intentions or trying to move too quickly. Don't suggest spending the entire weekend with your ex for the first time you meet in person after breaking up. In fact, I don't even recommend going for dinner or anything more than just meeting for coffee for half an hour. And lastly, this is really important, but don't refer to this meetup as a date or give the impression that there's anything remotely romantic about the hangout. Because if your ex senses a trap or thinks that the meetup will be anything overly extensive or dramatic, then they'll likely decline the invite. So just keep it really casual and ensure that your suggestion to meet in person sounds like it'll be brief and enjoyable for your ex. Tip number 3, play it cool and act like you don't give a f***. Now this ties into what I just talked about. It's important to act as though you're not really invested in the idea of meeting up and that you're just sort of throwing out the idea without really caring too much about whether it actually comes to fruition. Now if he or she says no when you suggest this meetup, if they make an excuse or if they just flat out ignore your message, sure, that's going to be somewhat upsetting, obviously, but don't get too emotional or lash out at your ex. It's critical that you just you don't show any signs of your disappointment if things don't work out at first. Remember, you're just proposing this meetup for fun and to talk to your ex about something specific, and that's it. So that means that if it doesn't happen for whatever reason, you shouldn't be too upset or you shouldn't try too hard to think of alternate ways to convince your ex to agree to meet up. If your initial attempt to meet up does fail, your best move is usually to wait at least a week or two, or even longer, if your ex is really pushing back or not being receptive to your messages, and then try again later with a new strategy once you feel like things are going well again. Don't force it. Be patient and make sure that your second attempt at arranging an in-person meetup is very different than the first. Maybe you suggest grabbing dinner with some mutual friends, for instance, instead of a one-on-one coffee date. And tip number 4, make sure your ex actually enjoys the in-person hangout. See, a lot of people get overexcited when they do get a chance to meet with their ex in person for the first time, and they try to move too quickly or dive straight into the, serious relationship talks. And this is a huge mistake that can really backfire on you. So my suggestion is to avoid any serious discussions, especially anything related to your relationship, your breakup, or your future together. Now keep in mind that your ex agreed to meet up because he or she thinks you want to get together as friends, and that's it. So if you suddenly bring up the topic of your breakup or any of the issues that plagued your relationship, you'll put your ex on the spot and you'll blow your chances of meeting up with your ex again in the near future. The key to winning your ex back is to rebuild their attraction to you. You need to naturally and organically make your ex miss you and chase you, and you won't be able to do that simply by talking through your relationship problems. Instead, you want to make sure that your ex feels good when they're around you. Only then is he or she going to feel compelled to take you back and pursue building a new, stronger relationship. So, make your ex laugh, keep things lighthearted and playful, and avoid any kind of serious drama or serious discussions for as long as possible. If your ex has fun when you get together, they're far more likely to agree to meet again in the future, and they're far more likely to start thinking of you in a romantic way again. All right, and tip number 5 is to use the opportunity to subtly convey how awesome your life is since the breakup. Now, this is something that I've stressed again and again in my past videos, but I'll say it again here. You want your ex to leave this in-person meeting thinking to themselves, wow, my ex isn't sitting around feeling sorry for themselves. They're living an exciting, fun life without me. Why did I let such an awesome person ever slip out of my life? Now, you can achieve this by staying, positive and upbeat during any encounters with your ex, and by subtly hinting at some of the new and interesting developments and achievements in your life since the breakup. So really, blow up your ex's expectations by telling interesting stories about your cool and exciting life, and carefully inject some, humble bragging into the conversation when it feels appropriate to make sure that your ex knows you're still that fun, interesting person they remember from the earlier days of your time together. Okay, folks, that is my top 5 tips for meeting up with your ex. Let me know how it goes by sharing your stories in the comments below the video. And of course, be sure to visit breakupbrad.com/coaching if you're stuck in a difficult situation with your ex, so that you can sign up for my one-on-one coaching service and get my personal help winning them back. All right, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for subscribing to my channel, and good luck out there. Bye for now.